All right, all right, all right. It is. You can't make this shit up. And we are here. Had some technical delays, but I think we figured it out. Hello, I'm your host, David Washington, with my co host, Joel Davis, also known as JD. Hello, JD. Thank you again for joining us.
Good morning, David. Good morning, viewers.
Excellent. We'll get right into it. A New York judge ordered Donald J. Trump to pay $355 million in penalties, finding him and his company liable for civil fraud, stating that they lied about their wealth to dupe banks and others. The ruling forces changes in Trump's organization and imposes a 3-year ban on Trump serving as an officer or director of any New York company. The judge expressed concern about Trump's lack of remorse and denied their request to dismiss the charges. Let's go. What say you, Joel?
Well, for anyone that's in the real estate business or even close to it, David, it's hard to see this as anything except a political hit job. Um, I'm sure that the judge has probably never done a real estate deal in his life, but he has access to experts that should have told him that what this prosecutor was trying to convince him of is just not the way reality is, and it's just it's unbelievable. It's hard to imagine that it's not going to get overturned fairly quickly at some higher up level that's not as partisan as that court is.
Right. And those fines are just incredible. And if you would have asked me if this was happening maybe 10, 20 years ago, I would say, okay. And I think most people would agree. We all know Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump has a very long history in New York, New Jersey, across the nation, and we've known that he's been sort of a boss. And so maybe 20 years ago, I would say, okay, yeah, there's some, credibility to this. There's been some concerns about how he does business. However, for this to come out now, and um, when the court case was announced, I was thinking, why now? Why now? There were so many other opportunities for the legal community to address these issues. The banks have enjoy working with
That's right.
Donald Trump, and Donald Trump. I mean, when you look at it, Donald Trump, he saved jobs. He created jobs. He created a name for himself and his family. And I did not take a close look at this particular trial because I agree. And this is coming from a liberal. I agree. This is something beyond the pale. I just think it's a little bit too late to address these issues with him, and it just adds to his popularity.
That's right. It's stuff like that that makes the supporters just want to support him even more. Um, you know, this is a victimless crime. No one lost money in the deal. The banks have testified they love doing business with him. They want to continue to do business with him. Ironically, this court decision now stops any New York, I believe it's chartered is the technical term in the finding there, from doing business with this organization. What this is going to do is cause potentially banks to leave New York and certainly real estate developers to avoid New York. I was listening to a fellow that has a hedge fund. They had $1 billion, that's a billion, scheduled to put into New York State, mainly New York City, in investments this year out of the hedge fund. He canceled it immediately upon that finding. They're going
Really?
to be moving it to Florida, yay us,
Okay.
and in Texas. So when you look at the stuff, and some of the legal experts I've listened to have said, technically she is correct in this law does kind of say that, but now they're all saying this law needs to be removed. It should have never been there. It should have never been used. My understanding is it had never been used before. When they make arguments like, oh, he has different amounts on his tax return and his financial statement, obviously that you would have to. There's no other way you can do that. As we all know, when you're in business and you purchase any kind of an asset, you can only book that for what you paid for it and not what it's worth. It's irrelevant. If you paid double what it's worth, you could book double what it's worth. If you paid half of what it's worth, you don't get to book the street value of that asset and depreciate that. You have to book what you paid for it. And so, um, a week or two ago, I was having a conversation with a relative, and she's a dean at a college, and he worked in the federal or state government or federal government for probation for his whole life. They've never had a real estate investment in their life. They've never filed a business tax return in life. They were going on how terrible this was, and how he put these amounts on there, and he only had one amount on his tax return, and he put something else on his financial statement. And so my first argument was, well, okay, do you want him to put, let's say he had 18 million, if I remember right, maybe on the tax return for Mar-a-Lago, and he says it's worth, pick a number, whatever, 3 billion,
Okay.
2 billion, 1 billion, whatever it is. I'm like, would you rather he put the 2 billion on his tax return and depreciated that? Because the outcome of that is he reduces his taxes even further. Or do you want him to put on there what he paid for it? You can't put on there what it's worth. If you buy something today or 10 years ago, that's what you paid for it. That doesn't affect what it's worth. It may, depending on the economy. I've been in the real estate business my whole life. I've had all kinds of investments that were worth a lot more than I paid for them a year later. And unfortunately, especially back in the late 80s, early 90s, the S&L crisis, I had assets that were worth 10 cents on the dollar for what I paid for them. The federal government went into this disposal back then. Now, in the '08 recession, they did a lot better, a lot more of an orderly disposal. But back then, they were throwing stuff away for pennies on the dollar and just destroying everybody else's values around them. I had subdivisions set next to one that S&L out of Miami had foreclosed on next to me. Then the feds took over the S&L. They're just throwing away the lots in that subdivision and just destroyed my values along with them. That's kind of off subject, but it just shows that, market value is one thing. Taxable
Right.
value is a whole different version.
And there's so many complexities to this particular trial that, you know, most Americans are not following it because of its complexities. And when they hear this verdict, there's folks who say, "Oh my God, this is horrible." It's a witch hunt. That's one of the statements that are being made. Others are like, "Yay, we got Trump."
That's right.
But as you were saying, there's implications, consequences to
Yeah,
this particular verdict, and if that means resources and potential business leaving New York for other places, um, would they want to? You would think they would want to address this in some type of legislation or something like that in New York.
well, you would think, um, but but it feels like even though New York State has a lot of conservative areas to it, the city itself controls so much of that voter base that it just has some crazy outcomes on things. And I'm not, they're so eaten up with hating Trump for whatever reason that they just feel this is justified. And I think it does break down a lot around whether you support him or not. If you like him, you find this just, and even if you're just like, don't really hate him, but you're kind of in the middle, you find this ruling probably pretty hard to imagine. But there's a group of people that just hate Donald Trump for whatever reason, and
Right.
they see it as a win, and they think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Um, it is going to drive business out of New York State. There's no doubt about that. Of course, on the other side, good for the free state of Florida. So
Indeed. So what would be Trump's next step in regards to this? Can he appeal this decision?
he can appeal it, but like pretty much every other court decision, you have to bond off that amount of money, or you have to place it in a court registry or something like that. You can't just appeal it and avoid giving up that money. So that's always a problem. Um, and so he's still going to have to come up with a way to cover that. And the district attorney, James, I've heard her on a couple of comments this week, basically insinuating that she was going to step in immediately and start disassembling the company. I don't
Wow.
think the courts are going to allow that. I think you would have a court come in and put a stop to that, a hold on that immediately. But it's a significant amount of money. It doesn't matter how rich you are, even multi billionaires. 400 million in some kind of a liquid type asset to be able to bond this off is going to hurt their operation. That's for sure.
Agreed. And with James making the statements that she did make in regards to moving quickly to claim these assets. That feeds into the thoughts that this is a vindictive act towards Trump and his
Yes,
organization. And then, again, it feeds into this whole, now Trump is the victim of a justice system that's not fair.
that's right. Well, and his point that they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in
Right.
their way. That sells really well with his supporters because if you've been in business most of your life, you've probably felt kind of beat up by the system on occasion.
Sure.
And so, and even normal everyday citizens are out there, they feel beat up by the system too. And so when he makes that argument, that's a pretty easy sell to a lot of people.
I agree. I hear it from some parts of the Black community who are entrepreneurs, who are business owners,
That's right.
and they talk about the regulations, the taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And being an entrepreneur myself, I get it. I understand. I see what they're talking about. I see how they see themselves as Trump,
Hmm.
as being the one who's being attacked and attacked and attacked. We're just
That,
trying to make a living.
that's right. And the burden of government has in the 40-ish years plus, I guess, that I've been in business has clearly gotten worse and worse and worse. And it doesn't, that burden doesn't care what sex you are, it doesn't care what color you are. It just beats you down as a business person, no matter what. That and everybody can feel it.
Right. And there's no getting away from the accountability. We're all accountable. Like you said, like you just
Right.
said, we all feel it. And whether we do right or wrong, by society, by the people that we work with and work for, and our, customers, our voters, there
Hmm.
is that accountability. And again, going back to what I said in the beginning, I just thought this should have came years ago.
Right.
And so it feels like they're piling on. It really does. It,
Well,
mhm,
yeah, most of these politicians or political type people that are just hating him and coming after him all loved him before he ran for president.
that's
You know,
true.
they were all happy to take his donation checks,
That's
and
correct.
and they were happy to let him come in. If you remember back, might have been 80s, 90s, maybe 90s, where the city had worked forever to try to get the ice skating rink back up and running. He stepped in, took over Wallman Rink, got it up and running in time for the opening, way ahead of schedule, way under budget. And he was like the hero then. Now he seems to be the villain. So
Wow. You live, what's the quote? You live long enough to be the villain. You see yourself as the villain
I
or
haven't
something.
heard that, but that's probably sounds right.
It's from a Batman movie.
Uh,
Unfortunately, I'll get that quote down. But Trump's legal woes continue. Georgia, DC,
right.
um, and he's going to be the focus. He's going to be the focus between now and election day. He is the focus because of these things, and it feeds into his narrative and it feeds into his popularity. And I believe more and more people are identifying with the fact that government is coming after Trump, and he's just like the regular guy, and
Hmm.
we just want to help, his neighbors and his friends, but the government's not going to let him.
That's right. That's right. Every time they do something like this to him, his popularity increases.
Yes, indeed.
It's not hurting him at all.
Mm.
Financially, it is, but as far as public opinion, it's not.
It's keeping him in this race. Any final words?
No, I think that's it for this one.
Indeed, indeed. Well, again, everyone, we've got a long election cycle ahead of us. It is still early. We have Trump's court cases. I've spoken a number of times about the Fannie Willis debacle in Georgia, and
Mhm.
we'll hear more about that coming up very soon. But if you love what you hear, or if you don't, we would love to hear what you have to say. I've been responding to comments for the last 2 weeks. We've gotten very popular with what our content is saying. So please continue to comment. Let us know. what you think. Bring your facts, not your feelings. Please like, share, and let us know. You're going to see more of JD with us. We really appreciate it, JD. This is awesome, and there's so much more that we need to talk about. So thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity, David. I look forward to our, future together.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.